Some sounds are really annoying when you're lying in bed, desperately trying to get a few hours of sleep before a big day at work. A dripping faucet is one of them. No matter how hard you try to turn it off, it always continues to drip. Plock, 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 plock. Again and again and again it falls like an exploding bomb. I have been looking for the building manager to fix it for the last month, but the faucet continues to drip. Another annoying noise is when your neighbor is having a good time with her boyfriend. It's even worse when you're sexually dry and the head of her bed hits your wall. Bump! Oh yes, bump! Oh yes, bump! Impact, impact, impact! Ah! Bump, bump, bump! Well, at least they're done. Plock! Grr! Living in an apartment is new to me. I'm Mark Dupuis, 40 years old, recently divorced and new tenant in this apartment building. It's next to the community college where I work as a teacher. My wife Sandy left me 6 months ago. The divorce was finalized last month. I moved into this apartment shortly after we sold our house and split the equity. We were married for almost 15 years, but unfortunately we fell out of love with each other. It wasn't a traumatic divorce. Neither she nor I cheated. We just grew apart. Without children, which may have been the reason for our estrangement, the divorce was almost easy. But now I'm back to square one, living in a house filled mostly with students. But like I said, it had a very convenient location, less than 20 minutes walk from campus. I noticed my neighbor, a cute little brunette in her early 20s. The way our apartments were set up, my bedroom shares a wall with hers, and the walls are not very thick and not soundproof at all. One evening I was in my living room when I heard someone knocking loudly on her door. Shortly after this, I heard screams coming from the apartment. I even heard something crash and break on the floor, and the screams became louder. I'm not a former linebacker or anything like that. I'm just a fit 40-year-old man, almost 6 feet tall, fit, but not an athlete. However, I didn't want to listen to this argument all night long. Worst of all, I didn't want to witness anyone being beaten. So I pulled myself together, filled a cup with sugar, it's a ninja trick, and went to knock on my neighbor's door. As soon as I knocked on the door, the screaming stopped. Soon my young neighbor opened the door. At first, she wasn't sure who I was, but then I saw a look of recognition on her face. "Hello? I'm returning the cup of sugar I borrowed last week. Can I come in?" I said, winking at her. She immediately grasped my intention. "Smart girl. Of course, come in." The guy was in the living room. There was nothing special to look at. About my height, with bulging muscles that were done at the gym, he was a nice guy. I felt better. I was very glad that I didn't run into the 6'6" in professional football player type. He didn't like my intrusion, judging by his fierce look. "Excuse me, I see you have a visitor," I said. "Everything is fine. He's just a friend who is about to leave. Do you want the coffee I promised you?" "Of course, I even brought sugar." My neighbor turned to her guest. "Well, thanks for stopping by, Brad. See you on campus." He was unsure of his next step. I could guess what he was thinking. I don't want to leave, but there's another guy now, and I definitely can't bully her now. If I try to stay, she'll make it clear that she's kicking me out. It doesn't look good. Not cool at all. Should I just leave? At the end of the day, I'm a cool guy. Soon he was already at the door. "See you later, Janice?" So that's her name. Janice didn't even bother to answer. She simply locked the door. "I'll wait a few minutes to make sure he's really gone, and then I'll go back to my place," I said. Janice took my hand and pulled me into the kitchen. "Do not be silly. I promised you coffee and you will drink it," she said with a mischievous smile. "By the way, thanks for helping me with this loser." "Boyfriend?" she giggled. "He wants it. I've dated him a couple of times and he thinks I'm his girlfriend. He didn't take it too well that I didn't answer his calls. You came at the right moment, he started to scare me. Always ready to help a damsel in trouble." We chatted for almost an hour over a cup of decaf coffee. Janice came from a small town about 100 miles away. At 20, she was in her second year of studying for her bachelor's degree. Her father passed away 2 years ago. He got into a car accident, which left him in a coma and left him a complete vegetable. While she was telling this story, Tears flowed down her cheeks. After a few weeks, doctors told the family it was time to turn off life support. They had mostly accepted the family decision, her younger brother and herself voting to pull the plug, and their mother clinging to the faint hope that he could still come to his senses. I ended up in the chair next to her, holding her as she cried on my shoulder. We remained in this position for many minutes. While she cried, I thought about how I could have had a girl like her if Sandy had wanted to have children. I know I would be a good father. It was time to leave. I kissed Janice on the forehead. Well, now I'll leave you. Will you be okay? Yes. And thank you very much for helping me twice tonight. I'm so embarrassed. You came to help me. And in the end, I cry like a child because I miss my dad so much, she answered with a forced, sad smile. It's okay. Do not think about it. Just remember that I'm just one door down the hall if you need me, I said, standing up and heading towards the door. I was already leaving when she called out, Hey, I forgot to ask what your name is. Mark. She came closer to me, stretched a little, and kissed me lightly on the lips. Thank you for everything, Mark. My pleasure. The following weekend, I spent a quiet evening at home reading a book. As for women, I did have a dry period. To be clear, I haven't made love to a woman since the night Sandy told me she wanted a divorce. This was 8 months ago. I wasn't ready to date yet. Around midnight, I heard a soft knock on the door. I opened the door and saw Janice. Hello, she said. I hope I didn't, wake you up. No, not at all. I was just reading. Please come in. As soon as I saw her walking, I knew she was drunk. How are you doing? Did you go anywhere this evening? I asked unconvincingly, guessing that she was coming from the bar. Yes, I was leaving, but I didn't want to have fun or anything like that. I've been thinking about my dad all the time, since last week, when we talked. What the hell have I gotten myself into? Did I want to be her new 24/7 psychiatrist, who just happened to live next door? Well, she's a nice child, and of course I can't refuse her. I took her to the living room. She threw herself on the sofa. Now I had to think fast. What is the correct behavior? I'll offer her coffee. She definitely needs it. What can I offer? Coffee? Janice looked at the open bottle of red wine on the coffee table. A glass of this will be just right. Or beer, if you have it. I had a few beers in the fridge, but I wasn't sure it was wise to give her booze. Okay, she's an adult and needs to learn from her mistakes, just like I did at her age. Soon we were sitting on the sofa, me with a filled glass of wine, and she with beer. She moved closer to me on the couch and rested her head on my shoulder. I miss Dad so much. You are the first person with whom I enjoy talking about this. She straightened up a little, took a sip of beer, and looked at me. I hope everything is okay. You're not mad at me for coming here to feel better, are you? She seemed so emotionally fragile at that moment that I had to say the right words. Not at all, Janice. I'm always glad to see you. With great satisfaction, she again laid her head on my shoulder. Her hand was behind my back, and her left hand was wrapped around my waist. Crap. I was with a young, pretty girl half my age, and I was as horny as a man who hadn't had sex in 8 months. I couldn't help it. I hoped she wouldn't notice. I like to just hold you like this, she said. I told you about myself. Tell me more about yourself. I know that you teach at a college and that you are divorced, but that's all. Why did you divorce? I told her about my marriage and how it just fell apart around Sandy and me. We reached the point where we became more friends than lovers, caring for each other, but left with the empty feeling that we were going nowhere. I stopped talking when I realized she's fallen asleep. Very carefully, I pulled myself free and sat her down on the sofa, taking off her shoes. The pillow and blanket soon turned my sofa into a bed. Besides, it was time for me to go to bed. I left a light on in the kitchen so Janice would know where she was if she woke up during the night. A few hours later, I woke up to Janice in the bathroom. I expected her to leave and go back to her apartment, but to my surprise, she came straight to my bedroom. Silently, she took off her trousers and sweater, she was wearing a blouse, and slid into bed with me. Very gently, she stuck to my body and hugged my waist. I didn't move or let her know I was awake. I'm horny again. Just like the last 8 months, nothing came of it. Janice soon fell asleep. It was a little more difficult for me, but I still fell asleep. The next morning, I was awakened by the sun streaming through a crack in my curtain. Janice was still in bed with me. She threw back the blanket and lay on her side, facing me. I took a few minutes to admire the beautiful woman sleeping in my bed. She had beautiful, long, slender legs, and her hips formed a beautiful, pronounced curve. Her blouse rode up, revealing her beautiful, soft abs. Obviously, she wasn't wearing a bra, and she didn't need one. Her lovely small breasts defied gravity and stood proud under her clothes. I was dying to reach out to her, to touch her, to caress her, and discover the softness of her skin. Admiring her breasts, I realized that she had also woken up. I don't know how long she looked at me while I admired her body. There was a sleepy smile on her face. "Hello," she said in a hoarse voice. "Good morning to you, too. I'm surprised to find you here this morning. The last time I saw you, you were snoring and drooling all over my couch." I smiled. She lightly tapped me on the shoulder. "I don't snore." "Oh, yes. Sober for now. Why don't you just go back to your apartment instead of crawling into bed with a horny old geezer like me?" "Because it seemed right. The last time I fell asleep drunk in a friend's apartment, I woke up to him trying to take off my pants and I was already topless. I feel safe with you and we both need company." She moved closer to me, pulled back the blanket and lay down next to me, placing her hand on my chest. She held me tightly, pressing herself against me. Her hand began to gently caress my chest and stomach. I tried in vain to ignore her. "It feels good to lie next to you," she purred. "Well, you're the first woman in my bed in 8 months, so that horny old man won't complain." "You're not that old," she said. Then her hand moved further down into my boxers. "But you're really excited," she said with a chuckle. Morning breath or not, I let her kiss me passionately. Her hand was now inside my boxers. Unable to resist any longer, my hands finally reached out to her. Her thighs were so soft. My hand went all the way to the top. I slipped my fingers under her panties to feel and squeeze her beautiful, round, firm buttocks, and then stroked her waist. Finally, I put my hand under the blouse and discovered the elastic softness of the breasts. And we kissed, our breathing labored due to our mutual arousal. After caressing each other, we had sex. Soon we found ourselves in each other's arms. We snuggled close to each other and soon fell asleep. We spent the rest of the weekend together, having sex many more times. She really was a sweet girl, funny, full of life, beautiful, and sexy as hell. I had no right to be with such a woman, almost half my age, but she didn't seem to mind. We parted on Sunday evening with a simple promise to see each other. Over the next 2 months, she became a regular visitor to my apartment, mostly to go out to dinner a couple times a week and have sex. We both knew that our sex meant nothing, but it sure felt like a very good release from all my untapped sexual needs over the last year. We never discussed the nature of our relationship. I kept telling myself, "Don't rock the boat. Enjoy it while you can." And it lessened my sense of loss after my divorce from Sandy. One afternoon, on my way home, I walked into a store. A woman came in right behind me. I took a quick look and shuddered. I watched as she headed towards the refrigerator. "Maria?" She turned around and recognized me. "Mark?" I simply nodded. Maria was my former school friend. She was my first and I was her first. We were so young and in love so much that we believed we would get married right after high school. And then one day she broke up with me over the phone without giving any explanation. A month later, her family moved out, and that was the last I heard from her. I never forgot her, and the ghost of our relationship haunted me for many years. I felt a little confused and unsure of what to do. I just wanted to hug her, but at the same time, I wanted to run away the same way she ran away from me. She took the first step. She came up to me and kissed me on the cheek. "My God, Mark, it was so long ago." 20 years ago? More precisely, 23. I was 17 and now I'm 40. There was a slight silence. Her brown hair was cut short. At the time, it was shoulder length. She had been pretty then, but now she was absolutely gorgeous. Her curves filled out quite nicely over the years. "You look good," I stated. You too, she replied. Have you returned to the city? No. I regularly come to work or visit some family. Well, I don't know what you're doing right now, but do you have time to grab a coffee or something just to catch up? Her face lit up. Certainly. It would be great. We went to a small coffee shop next door. We spent an hour catching up. She found out that I was recently divorced, and I found out that she recently lost her husband. I didn't have children, but she had two. I was dying to ask her a question. Why did she leave me in high school? However, I didn't do this. I was very happy to meet her again and didn't want to spoil her mood. I didn't notice any special changes in her. Yes, there were a few lines around her eyes, and she seemed a little depressed after talking about her late husband. But she was witty, and, most importantly, she still giggled at my jokes. When she told me she was heading back to the bus station to go home, I told her my car was just down the street and offered to give me a ride instead of trying to hail a taxi in such terrible weather. She agreed. Soon we were already sitting in the car and driving to the bus station. At the bus station, we exchanged phone numbers. She ran away in the rain. From that moment on, my thoughts were only about her. Well, with the exception of those few times when Janice and I met and had fun. 2 weeks later, on a Friday afternoon, I decided to drive 90 minutes to Maria's hometown. I called from the gas station. Hello? Maria, this is Mark. How are you? Great. How are you? Same. Hey, I'm in your city, and could you spare an hour or two to grab a drink with an old friend? There was a moment's delay on the line. I think that would be very nice. Where would you like to meet? She finally said. I don't know. Is it your city? Tell me where and I will be there. Maria pointed me in the direction of a quiet bistro on the outskirts of town. She told me she would be there in about an hour. It only took me 20 minutes to find this place. I sat at a table that offered some privacy and waited with a drink, a soda, since I had to get home. What did I expect from this meeting, just to get to know her better? Let's see if there are still any feelings left between us. Most importantly, should I ask why she dumped me in high school? You can call me crazy, but this question has haunted me for 23 years. But I decided not to ask. I would probably look weird if I asked about a breakup between two teenagers that happened almost a quarter of a century ago. She'll probably run away as politely as speed allows. No, if she decides to reveal her reasons, fine. If not, I won't bother. Maria finally arrived at the bistro and immediately noticed me. Wow. She was a pleasure to look at. She was wearing a cute little blue dress that went just below her knees, showing off her very beautiful legs. Her curves were simply draped in fabric rather than hidden, and what a beauty they were. My blood pressure jumped a notch at the sight of her. She was wearing a small, unbuttoned sweater that revealed a low neckline of the dress, not so low that her breasts were on display, but low enough to promise you the full package if you were lucky. And I really wanted to be so lucky. I was in love when she was a lanky teenager. Now I'm in love with a gorgeous woman I lost many years ago. I stood up, and we exchanged quick glances and a kiss on the cheek. I'm so glad you called, Mark. Since I saw you, I have continued to relive the tender moments we shared together. What brought you to the city? You. I don't have class on Friday afternoon, so I decided to come here this morning and see if I could be lucky enough to see you. And I must admit, I also thought a lot about what you meant to me many years ago, I replied. Maria had the taste to blush at my remark. We ordered drinks when the waitress stopped at our table. A glass of white wine for her and a beer on tap for me. I was partly glad that I was interrupted since our date began in too sweet a manner. Over the next 2 hours, I learned that she had attended college in this very city, received a degree in accounting, and had been working for the same firm since graduation. Maria expressed surprise that I became a geography teacher. I was the athletic type, not the academic type. Maria started laughing. I still remember how in the 8th grade the geography teacher sent you to the principal. I didn't remember it at all, and my frown must have been obvious. Oh my God, you forgot about it. I think that was the moment I fell in love with you. The teacher asked, "Who knows the capital of Turkey?" You immediately raised your hand, apparently the first in this class. Then you said that the capital of Turkey is cranberry, which can be found between the stuffing and mashed potatoes, just around the peas. All the students had a good laugh and you were quickly kicked out of the class. My God, yes, I was such a student, the kind of person I now hate as a teacher. And the worst thing was that I knew very well that the capital was Ankara. Later that year, I got a 100% on my political geography test, one of only 2 students to get a perfect score. After reminiscing about our school days, we started talking about our adult lives. There were many differences between our married lives. She married at 19 to her college sweetheart. It was a marriage under arms when she became pregnant, and her parents insisted on marrying a very nice and decent accounting student she met. For my part, I didn't get married until after college. A few years after I got married, I returned to get my master's degree and then my doctorate. She had a very successful marriage to Tom O'Connell, and they had 2 children, the eldest girl and the boy, now 18, both at university. My marriage did not produce any offspring. While it was terrible to see my marriage crumble around me and lead to divorce, Mary's marriage ended in tragedy. Her husband died in a car accident. Her eyes were full of unshed tears as she talked about his death. I gently placed my hand on hers in a friendly and placating gesture. I felt an electric jolt when I touched her, the emotions returning to me validated after so many years. I almost pulled my hand away, but restrained myself. We ordered food and talked about more pleasant things. We tried to rediscover each other. We didn't talk about anything too personal, but intimate details nonetheless. Our hobbies, our likes and dislikes, and the like. I left around 9 with a mutual promise to meet again. A light kiss on the cheek sealed the deal. I'm not one to let Farid do my job. The following Friday I went to see her again. Just like a week ago, she agreed to meet me, this time in an Italian restaurant. The place was small and cozy. I asked the waiter to put a couple of candles on the table. If last week she looked great, this evening she was breathtaking. Under the light coat, she was wearing a beautiful black dress, but not with such a deep neckline as that time. It was sleeveless and only tied, revealing slender, well-shaped shoulders. I stood up, took her hands and kissed her on the cheek, but didn't let go. I took a step back and looked at her. "Oh my God, Maria, you look absolutely gorgeous in this outfit," I said honestly. She giggled and blushed. "Thank you very much. A woman never fails to feel good from a gentleman's compliment," she replied and sat down. "Mark, you have to stop doing this," she finally said. This remark took me by surprise. I had no idea what she was talking about. "Stop doing what?" "Stop coming here, 90 minutes away, to call and ask me out on a date. What if I had other plans? I'm really glad to see you, but it would be very unpleasant to refuse, knowing that you came all the way here," she answered in a pleasant manner, and there was a twinkle in her eyes. What if I had a different date? I was shocked and embarrassed. It's true that I never thought that she had a life outside of my dreams, my desires, and my expectations. I wanted to see her, so I came here and asked her out. This was very careless on my part. "Oh, I'm so sorry. You're right. I'm just interfering in your life and expecting it to be like in high school, when you gave up everything when I called. I'm so sorry," I faltered while saying it. Maria giggled. "It's okay, Dofus. I'm kidding you. I don't have any social life to speak of. I'm not actually dating. I meet friends, but mostly couples I've known for years. They would jump for joy and dance around our table if they knew I was dating a man. Dofus. That's what she always called me when I acted like an idiot." I noticed that at the end of her explanation, there was a slight change in her mood. She looked at her wedding ring, still on her finger. "I haven't recovered from Tom's death yet. Several dates arranged by my friends were a disaster. I still love him and don't feel anything for anyone else yet. They were good people, and I felt sorry for them as I turned them down one after another. I felt like a fraud." She looked at me and her hand touched mine and rested on it. "And then I met you. No stress. Like it was just yesterday. I can just be myself. As if our paths had not diverged many years ago. And I thank you for that." Her hand tightened its grip on mine. "Can you believe that I surprised myself by singing old songs from our years together?" Humming her favorite songs was always a sure sign that Mary was in harmony with her life. Satisfaction in the moment always brings back the song. I remember Maria and I sitting together on the porch of my parents' house, her head on my shoulder, her arm around my waist, humming the latest pop song. "And you?" she asked. "Have you been dating since you got divorced?" The question brought me out of my thoughts. I felt very good in her company, and I definitely didn't want to lie to her. On the other hand, I didn't want to look like a wolfhound preying on young women. "Well, I haven't dated for almost a year. I didn't go on dates at all, but I had several unexpected encounters with my neighbor. Nothing serious and, well, completely unexpected and without a future, that's for sure," I answered, being honest, but withholding information about my neighbor's age. Maria let go of my hand. I felt like crap. Luckily, the waiter came to our table to take our orders and offered a much-needed distraction. The rest of the evening passed without incident. We remembered the old, happy time. Maria turned out to be just as energetic and spontaneous as I remembered her. I certainly hoped that she felt the same about me. After the divorce, I felt a little old and shabby. Janice helped me come to my senses a little, but it was important to me that Maria also found me still attractive. I didn't yet know what awaited us, but I hoped for the best. I left around 9, but this time we ended with a light kiss on the lips, which is not so strange, considering that back in the day, Maria and I French kissed for hours. All week I thought about going to meet Maria again. She resolved the issue by calling me. "Hi, Mark. I just want to say that you better not come here this weekend." My heart sank. "But I would like to meet for dinner on Friday, since I will be in your city. Keep in mind that I must be on the bus by 9 o'clock at the latest." "I hate driving," she added. Then I heard her giggly. "Gotcha." At the appointed time on Friday, I picked her up at an office building in the city center and we went to a good Thai restaurant not far from the bus station. Coming from a work meeting, Maria was dressed in simple black trousers and a purple shirt. Despite her conservative haircut, I was sure heads turned when she walked in. My days and nights were filled with memories, old and new, of my time with Maria. I constantly dreamed about her. Some of it was wishful thinking, but at the same time it was hope. We only had a couple of hours to be together, but it was just wonderful. After 3 dates, I felt like we had never been apart for 23 years. I still didn't know why she left me, but that was the least of my worries now. Was she interested in me? Was I just a comforting blast from the past to help her cope with her grief? Was I something that could be abandoned again on a whim? Can I afford to risk another betrayal? I wished with all my heart that we were together, but my biggest fear was that I would be pushed away again. I really needed to know why she broke up with me 23 years ago. This could determine whether I should let her go again or whether I can dream of moving on. One nice thing about this date was that we held hands a lot that evening. I was the first to put my hand on it. Then she reached over and covered my hand with hers, with a simple, caring expression on her face. We talked mostly about our years together, avoiding mention of our family life and the pain it brought. At the bus station, I leaned over to just kiss her on the lips, but she was in no hurry to tear herself away from me. "Thank you for the evening, Mark. I can't wait for our next meeting," she said, breaking the kiss. "See you next weekend. I'll call you on Thursday to arrange where we'll meet." Just before midnight, I called her. "I'm just calling to make sure you got there safe and sound." "How kind of you, but I have to admit that I didn't get here safe and sound. Part of me is still there, with you," she said. Wow, this was unexpected, even if I had been wanting this for weeks. How to answer? It's the same for me. I'll be a mindless zombie all week, waiting for us to meet again, because all my mind will be with you, only with you, I replied. "Well, don't let your neighbor take advantage of your brainless body. I love you." This last statement stunned me. I managed to croak out in despair. "I love you too. Good night." And I hung up. My God, did we both just say the word love? I had difficulty falling asleep. I thought I was moving too fast, so I had to rein in my feelings. But now she tells me that she loves me. I was embarrassed and happy at the same time. In my restless sleep, I dreamed of her magnificent figure. When I woke up, Janice was next to me. I went to the kitchen, and made coffee. An hour later, Janice walked into the kitchen, naked and beautiful, her hair disheveled. "Is there any coffee left?" I got up and made her a cup of coffee. "Janice, I have to ask you a favor," I said. "Oh, Mark, not this morning," Janice replied. "No, not this. I want you to know that I have met a woman that I really care about, a lot." "Yes!" she shouted. She stood up, came over to me, and hugged me. Despite everything I was going to say, the feeling of her firm breasts made me dizzy. My hand went down and cupped my buttock. "I am so happy for you. You deserve a good woman. You are such a good person and a good lover." I was dreading this moment, and suddenly, she is completely happy for me. If I had any doubts, now I knew for sure that she was completely indifferent to me. Yes, I must admit that after our first meetings, I began to dream about this young woman. Well, I don't want to offend you or anything, but what happened last night can't happen again. When I commit myself to a woman, it is a complete commitment. No outside sex, I explained. I understand and approve, Mark. We didn't have a future together, and it was only good until we met someone and committed ourselves to them. I would do the same if I met a guy I fell in love with. She then gave me a passionate kiss that lasted forever. In a way, I'm jealous. I kind of love you, and I would like you to have the same feelings for me. I'll get dressed and leave immediately. I was a bundle of nerves for the rest of the day. I had mixed feelings about breaking up with Janice, more precisely, pushing her away from you. Her appearance in my life gave me back some self-confidence. It is not surprising that a man's confidence awakens after he satisfies a young woman. But as much as I enjoyed spending time with Janice, how I felt the relationship with Maria was developing was more important. I really liked Janice. She was a very sweet child, and I wished her much happiness. But Maria was my first, and now I felt that she could be my next and last. Around 10 that evening, I called Maria. "Hello, Maria. Hi, Mark, I hope you're not around the next corner. I'm just about to jump in the shower and get ready for bed." I laughed. "No, I'm in my own apartment thinking about you." "How nice. I thought about you a lot today, too. So what's the matter?" "I thought a lot about what you told me." "And what was that again?" "You said, and I quote, 'I love you.'" There was silence on the other end of the line. This went on for at least an hour or maybe just a few seconds, but it seemed to me that a lot of time had passed. Did I misunderstand her? "Yes, that's what I said. I hope I didn't scare you away. It just seemed right at the time. I felt so good, and it had been so long since I could say it sincerely. I'm sorry if it didn't turn out that way." Her words came out as if she needed to apologize. No, not at all. It was wonderful, and I meant it when I replied that I love you too." For some time, not a sound was heard. A few seconds later, I heard her sobbing. "Maria, are you crying?" They... "I'll call you back," she said, and hung up. I sat by the phone for all 15 minutes, waiting, and answered after the first ring. "Hi, Mark. I'm sorry I switched off. My emotions got the better of me. I always find it difficult to go to bed. That's when I miss Tom the most. Love, care, and hugs. And then you called. It's true that I feel good with you, that I can really say that I love you, but at the same time, it made me feel cheap, like I was betraying him. But I began. Quiet, Mark. Let me finish. All my feelings were mixed up. I know I have to move on with my life, and suddenly you came out of nowhere, a blast from the past, the person I never really stopped loving. Today, I felt cheap, not because I said I loved you, but because in all the years I spent with Tom, I never admitted to him how much you meant to me, and that even in his arms I sometimes, mostly at the beginning, I kept thinking about you, she said, not allowing herself to be interrupted. There was silence for some time. I responded with my confession. Maria, I understand how you feel now. I did the same thing with Sandy and a few girlfriends I had before her. You were always there for them. I just don't feel the same guilt about having to live my life. I'm done with Sandy and my broken marriage. Now there is only you and what I feel for you, I said carefully. Another silence followed. Can we leave everything as it is for now? And maybe we can talk about it next weekend when we meet? Asked Maria. This is a good plan. I'll call you later this week. We met again the following week. I got behind the wheel and we went to a quiet restaurant. When we met, Maria gave me a pleasant kiss that lasted a few seconds, followed by a heartfelt hug. I felt a lot of tenderness in this simple gesture. This set the mood for the whole evening. During the meal, Maria insisted that I drink some wine with her. I hesitated and then decided that I could always get a hotel room later that night. After our declaration of love, we were very sensitive all evening. Our conversation was more about what we expected in the future, rather than what we did together when we were younger. The evening passed so quickly that the first thing I realized was that the meal was finished. The bottle of wine was empty, and it was time to leave the restaurant. I drank 3 glasses of wine and couldn't get behind the wheel of my car. That's what I told Maria. This is madness. You can't take a taxi to your city, she said. No, I'll just find a motel nearby, no big deal. Forget about the motel. There are many rooms in my big house. Today you will stay with me, that's all. Maria answered, and a few minutes later I found myself at her house. She opened another bottle of wine, and we sat on the sofa. We were both completely devastated, a little embarrassed or even panicked by this development. After a while, I raised my glass and proposed a toast. A toast to a wonderful woman, I said. Maria blushed. A toast to a handsome man who brings hope for the future, she replied. We took a sip from our glasses and placed them on the coffee table, looking at each other with shy smiles on our faces. Obeying an impulse, I leaned towards her and began to gently, carefully kiss her. In a matter of seconds, the kiss turned into an intense cuddling session on the couch. I'm pretty sure that Maria had a lot of untapped sexual emotions that came out in that passionate kiss. We were glued to each other, and the years of separation disappeared from our thoughts. We were 2 horny teenagers madly in love again. I can't remember who started what, but soon, our hands were exploring each other's bodies. I came to this realization when my hand touched her breast. From that moment on, nothing could stop us. We stopped kissing and looked at each other. I saw the lust on her face, and it was mutual. Maria, I love you. I need you. She got up from the sofa and picked me up. Let's go too? I want it too, she said, pulling me into her bedroom. There we undressed, without wasting a second. Without ceremony, I hugged her and led her to the bed. I pushed her onto her back and left a trail of kisses from her lips to her chest, and then down. Maria was no longer the slender teenager I knew, but a mature woman with an abundance of soft curves. It was like a new discovery of hers. We made love tenderly for the rest of the night. We have rekindled a long-lost love that until recently we thought was lost. The best of our lovemaking was the hugs and gentle caresses without sexual intent that followed our physical tensions. The next morning I woke up with Maria with her hand on my chest and her soft body pressed against my side. She was beautiful in this peaceful moment. I never knew her like this. As teenagers, we would only have a few brief moments of sexual ecstasy, and then it would be time to go home to our parents. I never woke up with Maria in my arms, another first experience. We spent a very pleasant morning together, had breakfast, kissed, drank coffee, kissed, had lunch, kissed, and then made love before I had to go home. For the next few weeks, I spent every weekend at her house, and we Skyped every evening. A month later, Maria announced that she would be in town on Friday for a meeting at the headquarters of her accounting firm. I knew this meeting was important. We were so much in love that we already talked about the impossibility of living separately, and at the same time, it was impossible to commute 90 minutes to work every day. Maria suggested asking for a transfer to the main office. It would also allow her to be closer to her son and daughter, who also lived here. Funny thing. We were close enough to talk about moving in together, but I still hadn't asked her why she left me. The moment never seemed right to ask that nagging question. It had such a negative connotation that I never found a way to ask it without risking damage to our relationship. This was the question I kept in my lonely evenings away from Mary. While I was with her, I only told her how much I loved her and how good I felt with her. On Thursday, we agreed to meet at a restaurant in the city center and spend the weekend at my house. I hated cleaning. I had some bad bachelor habits, including simply putting dirty laundry in the closet and putting dishes in the sink until I ran out of dishes. This is not the way to impress a woman on a date, that's for sure. I had just loaded the washing machine and was heading back to my apartment when Janice opened her apartment door. Her eyes were red, and she looked upset. "Janice, is something wrong?" I saw that it was difficult for her to keep from crying. "I need to talk to you," she said, sobbing. "Can I come?" Oh my God, broken heart. My first instinct was to reject her demand. With our history and my newfound love for Maria, I didn't think it would be wise to let her use me as a comforter again. But at the same time, she looked very sad and showed so many signs of distress. I realized that I could not drive her away in the form in which she was. I was confident that my love for Mary would prevail. Janice went straight to the couch, sat down and cried. I sat down next to her, put my arm around her shoulders and pulled her close so she could cry on my shoulder. "What happened, Janice?" I'm pregnant," she finally said. And she cried even louder and stronger. My heart stopped for a couple of beats. Pregnant. There was only one question left to ask. "Am I the father?" Janice regained her composure. "Yes. I haven't slept with anyone since I met you." "But you told me you were taking pills," I said, hating the accusation in my tone. "I had an infection and had to take an antibiotic when I met you." "I didn't know it would work on my pills," she said. Then she began to sob again. "Oh, Mark, I'm not ready for this. I'm just starting college. I want to do something. I don't want to be pregnant." I didn't know what to say. In principle, I am not a supporter of abortion. This is the last thing for me. But I also believe that women can decide what to do with their bodies, and that if Janice decides one way or the other, I should be there to support her. "Maria, my God, I just met the woman of my life. I met the only woman who I was sure could be the old lady who would hold my hand after I retired. I met a woman who will grow old with me. No, think about it later. Focus right now on the problem at hand. Janice, what are you going to do? It's your choice, and I promise that I will always be with you. What do you feel you should do?" "I don't want an abortion, but I don't want a child either. I have too much to do. I need to finish college. I need to travel. I have to see the world." "I can't have a child," she said, and began to cry again. I counted the months in my head. The baby will probably be born in the fall, right in the middle of her semester. But with some effort, she could probably give birth to a child without harming her studies. Can I become a father? Take care of your child during a sabbatical. It would be doable. Maria, how will she react to this development of events? We just renewed our love for each other. We were in love with each other, but how would she react to suddenly having a child in my future? Oh, by the way, Maria, move in with me. But for the child, we will need a larger apartment. I'm so screwed. Janice stopped crying. I'm thinking about giving the child up for adoption. Her idea cut me to the core. For the last 15 years, I have dreamed of becoming a father. Sandy's too many birth control pills ruined my hope, and now a young woman was carrying my child, and I was ready to give him or her up. Never. That night, Janice and I ended up in bed, but not as lovers. She needed my calming presence. The next day, I had a very hard time at work. Like a zombie, I simply served my class by running away without answering any questions. I had to gather my courage to meet Maria and tell her about this new event in my life. It was too serious to even try to keep silent. At 6Y, I entered the restaurant. Maria was already there. We kissed and I sat down. I wasn't very talkative. We looked at the menu in silence. It was then that I realized that Maria was also very quiet. She sat tensely in the chair and barely glanced at me. It didn't really affect the rest of the evening well, knowing that I had terrible news for her. Maria, is something bothering you? I finally asked, delaying the moment when I would have to tell her about my awkward situation. Maria, the beautiful woman I loved, looked at me with a very sad expression on her face. "Yes, as a matter of fact. I have some disturbing news for you, and I'm not sure you'll like it very much," she said, barely audible over the noise of the restaurant. "Well, come on. I have bad news for you, too." "What's the matter?" "No, you first. Her company probably informed her that her transfer request was denied. Or this request faded into the background for some time. After I tell her about Janice, she'll probably feel relieved." "This is the second time you've put me in such a difficult position," she began. "I just hope I don't lose you over it this time." Now I'm lost. What is she talking about? My thoughts were interrupted when Maria continued, "I never told you why I broke up with you at school. My parents forced me. They didn't think you were a reliable person for me. You were too wild. They thought you wouldn't amount to anything and decided that I should stay away from you. So that's why she broke up with me. Her parents forced her. They were so sure that I had a bad attitude towards Maria that the whole family moved out." Wow. It was nice to finally hear the truth. But Maria brought me back to the present. When Mom realized that I got pregnant from you, she told Dad about it, and he decided to break all ties between us. He had a standing offer to move, and he accepted it. For him, you were not a suitable husband, and he also wanted to avoid the terrible shame of having an unmarried, pregnant daughter. Well, you've done it again. Today I found out that I am pregnant with your child. Again. I choked on my drink and water even came out of my nose. Maria is pregnant, and Janice is pregnant. What a mess. What should I do now? Maria came closer and hit me on the back while I was choking on my drink. "It's okay, Mark. Do not panic. I love you, and we will have a child, like many couples before us, starting with Adam and Eve. I had to say it straight because I found out today and I'm a little upset, but also because my 2 children are coming to meet us here. I wanted to introduce you to them because we are moving towards something that will interest them," Maria said. "We'll talk about this later, but I should have told you right away." "What did you want to tell me?" she asked after I had regained my breathing. "Well, okay, it's like, I began to say. "Oh, this is Joshua, my baby." Maria interrupted me. A smiling young man approached our table. "Josh, this is Mark, my old school friend. Mark, this is my son Josh," Maria introduced us. I stood up and shook his hand. Even meeting him for the first time, he looked so familiar that I felt that we had known each other for a long time. Genetics rules. We were exchanging greetings when Maria said to us, "And here is my daughter, my firstborn." I was about to sit down when I turned my head towards the new visitor. It was Janice. I missed a chair, fell to the floor, hit my head on a nearby table, and caused a bit of a commotion. As stunned as I was, I could see that Janice was just as surprised as I was. She stood there, mouth agape, as Maria and Joshua helped me up. As soon as I stood up, Maria introduced me to Janice. "Janice, this is Mark, the man I told you about." "Mark, this is Janice, my eldest," Maria said. We shook hands. I don't know how to accurately describe this dinner. Awkwardness? Confused? Nightmare? All at once? When Janice and I shook hands, we had an unspoken understanding that our relationship would not involve Maria and Joshua. I'm also sure that Maria didn't want to share the news of her pregnancy with her children right away. And Mary's revelation shed new light on my relationship with Janice, her firstborn. Janice didn't know it yet, but I was her father. What a mess. I felt like crap. I was an unsuspecting bastard, a pervert. I slept and knocked up my own daughter. Can my life go any lower? I was devastated. But now was not the time to talk about it. However, there were many huge life-changing secrets that needed to be kept. Luckily, Joshua was there, unaware of the tension at the table. His calm nature made us all feel a little better during dinner. He even teased me a little about my relationship with his mother. There was nothing offensive about it, just a little teasing that made me like him a lot, but in my mood, I couldn't reciprocate. Unfortunately, he left first to meet his friends. After he left, silence reigned at our table. I love Maria. I had to admit what was happening to my life. But this was not the place. I asked if they would be willing to come to my house. Maria wasn't sure at first, but when Janice said it was a great idea, Maria agreed. We jumped into a taxi. When I gave the address, Maria had a strange expression on her face. After all, it was the same address as her daughter. "Funny?" said Maria. "This is your address, Janice." Neither Janice nor I responded. The ride only took 5 minutes, 5 long minutes. I paid for the taxi and we all entered the building. Janice unlocked the front door and we obediently walked up to the second floor. Janice walked ahead and stopped in front of my door. Stunned, Maria looked at the next door down the hall. Janice's door. I took the key and unlocked the door. Maria, Janice, and I silently entered my apartment. "Ladies, have a seat. I'll go get a couple of beers and we need to talk." Maria and Janice were sitting on the sofa. A minute later, I came back and gave each of them a beer. I don't know how much Janice told her mom and what Maria might have told Janice, but I had a bad feeling that I was the only one who had all the information and that it was my duty to tell about the mess we were in. I can't do everything in the world, but I'm not a coward. Let's deal with the worst first. Maria, Janice, I need to clear things up and tell you what's going on. Each of you has part of the truth, but not all. I hate to say what I say because it could make me lose the woman I love again. I looked at both of my girls. One was the love of my life, and the other was my daughter and the victim of a sad twist of fate. "Janice, I'll start with you," I said. "From what your mother told me today, I believe that you are my daughter." As soon as I said that, Maria and Janice jumped up from the couch at the same time and started talking. "No, it can't be," Janice said. "No, that's not true," said Maria. Janice and I turned to Maria. "But you said I got you pregnant in high school?" "Yes, it is. But I was so upset after I broke up with you, both because of the move and because of the mutual accusations. A month after we moved, I had a miscarriage. I lost my child. Be that as it may, Janice is only 20 years old." "She's too young," Maria said. Janice and I took our seats. "Can you spell relief?" Understanding came to Mary. "Oh my God, I didn't have time to finish and tell you. You thought Janice was your daughter. That's why you were silent all evening and behaved so strangely." "Yes, partly. I had other reasons," I replied. Maria leaned back in her chair and began to giggle. "I thought this was the news I told you about before." "This and much more," I said. I looked at Janice. "I was wrong about you, and now I feel a little better." Then I turned to Maria. "Maria, as you can probably guess, Janice is my neighbor. Maria, I love you with all my heart, and what you told me earlier is fantastic news, but..." I fell silent, not daring to continue. "My butt," erased the smile that appeared on Maria's face. Instead of finishing my sentence, I turned to Janice. "Janice, I love your mother with all my heart. I belong to her with all my heart and soul. Your mother told me earlier in the restaurant that she was pregnant with my child." This revelation stunned Janice. She looked at me exhausted. She then looked at her mother, who smiled again at my declaration of love. To Maria's surprise, but not mine, Janice put her head in her hands and began to cry. Maria hugged her shoulders. "It's okay, Jaja. It won't change the love I have for you and Josh," she said, unaware of the real drama behind Janice's tears. Janice carefully pulled herself away from her mother's embrace, grabbed her purse, and stood up. "I have to go home, Mom," she told her mother. Then she turned to me. "Tell her, or I will do it." She rushed to the door and left, causing Maria to show a visible mixture of emotions, mostly surprise and sadness. Maria turned to me. "Mark, I'm so sorry. I can't believe she took it so hard. I really thought she was happy that I met a man and fell in love with him. Although you should have let me break the news to my children. After all, you are still a stranger," she said, looking sideways at me. "Hardly, Maria. Hardly. I've known Janice for many months. After all, she is my neighbor." Maria looked at me uncertainly. "We became friends when I helped her with an abusive guy," I began to say. A real good friend. A piece of the puzzle finally began to come together in Maria's mind. Her mouth opened wide in an O of realization. You mean that..." she began. "Yes. Janice and I were lovers. Before I met you," I answered her unasked question. I knew that there would be an even more offensive confession ahead. Maria, I want you to know that I love you just as much as I did when we were younger. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. In my thoughts and in my heart there is only you. I want to be yours forever, and I want you to be mine forever. And I have to be honest. You knew I was dating a woman before we even met. She was the only woman after my divorce and before I met you. Again. My God. Maria, that woman was Janice, your daughter. Finally, I found the courage to tell her about it, and I also knew that I still had to say. Maria fell on the sofa, away from me, and cried. "What a mess," she repeated. Finally, I got the courage to sit next to her, hugged her, and began to calm her down. It took several minutes for her sobs to subside. Now it's time to talk about the real problem. Maria, do you understand how much I love you? Yes, Maria answered, sobbing. Do you love me as much? Yes, she muttered, laying her head on my shoulder. Then she looked at me and said, yes, more decisively. Here it is, I thought. A week ago, Janice came to me with very disturbing news. She told me she was pregnant. Maria immediately developed a maternal reflex. She sat up straight on the sofa. What? My daughter is pregnant and won't tell me about it? What's wrong with her? She should know that I will help her in any way I can, said Maria. Then she looked at me with obvious hurt. Why did she say this to you and not to me? And so it was. Because she thinks I'm the father, I answered, ready for anything. It took a few seconds for my answer to reach Maria. I watched her reaction all this time. It's hard to describe all the emotions I saw on her face. First hesitation, then sincere resentment, and then a decisive look. She stood up, looked at me, and hit me hard in the face. She then left the apartment without saying a word. I didn't have the strength to call out to her. I just sat there, sipping my beer, celebrating another lost love. I guessed that mother and daughter were now standing face to face. I couldn't understand what they could be talking about, but one thing was clear. They turned down the volume, since I couldn't hear anything from the next apartment. Perhaps tears don't make noise. Mine are not. I had a hard time keeping my thoughts clear. At some point, I imagined myself rushing around the neighborhood, knocking on the door of Janice's apartment, shouting about my love for Maria. The next time I was in my apartment, where I was being served with a paternity suit, saddled with child support, without the love that comes with paternity. I stretched out on the couch, longing for one last time with my two girls, but found only a pillow as a companion. Maria, I love you so much. I have loved you all my life. I never stopped loving you. Why did this nightmare have to happen to us again? I heard a quiet knock on the door. Maria? Without bothering to look through the peephole, I opened the door. A gloomy Joshua stood there. Without waiting for an invitation, he walked past me and sat down in a chair. Man, you're in trouble! I saw a lot of things happen in the hostel, but nothing like this happened, he said. Don't just stand there, old man. Close the door and sit down. I was glad he didn't hit me right away. I wasn't sure I deserved this fate, but the way I felt and the way the evening unfolded, I almost expected it. Like a prisoner on my last night, I returned to the sofa and hunched there. Do you love my mother? Yes, I love her. I will do anything to erase everything that has happened in the last 6 months, except meeting your mother. I want to finally get the chance to be with her forever. I love her with all my soul, I answered. Do you love Janice? I like Janice, but this is not love, not the love I feel for your mother, Joshua. As soon as I met your mother, I ended my relationship with Janice. Trust me, Joshua. Janice doesn't stand between me and your mom, I said honestly. Joshua looked at me without saying a word. I felt that he was not the enemy. He seemed pretty tough for someone so young and faced with such a shitty situation. Maria and Tom did a really good job, I thought. And what are you going to do? I know that your mother is truly hurt and wants nothing more to do with me. But I keep thinking that it would be best if Janice gave up her child. I saw Joshua's face frown. so that your mother and I can adopt him and raise him or her with our children. I love your mom, and I think we can raise both children. But, Joshua, I'm afraid this is wishful thinking. Joshua sat again, not saying a word, seemingly contemplating my decision. Finally, he stood up. Now I'm going to visit my mother and sister. We have a lot to talk about. Dude, you're so bad. But next time we meet, please call me Josh, not Joshua, he said. This last phrase really lifted my spirit. I realized that I had an ally. I spent the next hour in worry and fear, but my thoughts were less gloomy. Joshua gave me hope. An hour later, closer to midnight, I heard another knock on the door. This time I looked through the peephole. The whole family was there. I opened the door, afraid of what would happen next. I opened the door and immediately saw that Maria had been crying a lot, and her eyes were red from the tears she had shed. But at the moment, I could not understand her. She seemed distant, but at the same time she looked straight at me. I couldn't understand her mood. She didn't seem angry, which was a good sign. She didn't seem very loving, which is what I was afraid of. There was sadness and expectation on her face. First point, Joshua said. He only looked at you, Mom. And Joshua pushed his way into the apartment, followed by Janice, who looked very depressed, and Maria. However, I stopped Maria on the threshold, gently grabbing her hand. Maria, whatever decision you come to, remember that I love you as I have never loved anyone before, I said. She looked at me and simply squeezed my hand before sitting down on the couch with Joshua and Janice. I don't know if they had a script before they came, but this mess was pretty much my own, and I decided I had to be the one to break the ice first. I really didn't know what to do. Everything was so far from my past experience, but I had to say what I wanted to happen next. This is a really bad situation, and I'm ready to face whatever you decide. Maria, I love you too much to go against your wishes. You may break my heart again, but it doesn't matter. All that matters is what you think is right. Janice, as I told you, I'm ready to accept my paternity. You're too young to take care of a child. You have so much ahead of you. Give birth to the child, and I will take care of it. You will have a choice. Be a part of how I raise my child or be completely cut off from him. The same applies to you, Maria. I can take care of the child myself, even if I have to hire a nanny. Yes, exactly. And the nanny will be pregnant within a year, Josh said. I turned to him, ready to hit back, but I saw his mischievous smile. I've calmed down. Come on, girls, go ahead. I'm ready for anything you throw at me, I said. Maria and Janice looked at each other, and an understanding arose between them. Then Janice turned to me. I agree with your idea, she said. I will have a child, and I will give you full custody rights, and I expect that you will not ask for child support. In any case, I don't have money to pay. I really wish I could see the baby from time to time. Eventually, you will have to tell the child that I am a mother. Will you be okay? Absolutely right, Janice. I am ready to take care of the child myself. As for disclosing your maternity, we will take care of that when the need arises. We will decide together, I answered. Over the past few months, I have learned that you are a very sweet young lady, and I promise you that you will be a part of the child's life for as long as you want. Do you have any other requests or questions? No, she said. I did my part. Now it's between you and Mom. With that last sentence, she stood up and walked toward the door, followed by Josh. This left Maria and I alone for a final confrontation. I looked at her, full of expectation. Her face was still an impenetrable mask. God, I love it, and swore to myself that if I had a chance, I would learn to read it better. You have all already reached a verdict together, I guessed. She simply nodded, looking directly at me for the first time. And what? For some time, she did not say a word. She just looked at me. The hostility was gone, but her face was sad and uncertain. I stood up and knelt down in front of her. May I venture one more guess? Again, she simply nodded. You realize that I was always truthful, never lied to anyone, that I really love you, and decided that we would take care of 2 children together, I said with great hope. Her gaze lost its severity when I spoke. It was filled with love. "Yes," she answered simply. 2 months later, Maria and I were married in a civil ceremony at City Hall. It was a little quick, but this way, we avoided Maria and Janice revealing their pregnancy in front of their families. My parents were overjoyed at Mary's return to the family. Maria's parents were a little more cautious. They still had to come to terms with the fact that I was not the scoundrel they thought I would become. Her father was giving away the bride, and her mother's wariness gradually melted away. Apart from Janice, Josh, Maria, and me, no one knew about future children. We later made a family decision not to say anything about my role in Janice's pregnancy. This would be too much for any parent. 6 months after our wedding, Janice gave birth to a beautiful 7-pound crying baby girl, and we adopted her immediately. 3 weeks later, Maria gave birth to our boy. We agreed to name him Tom, in honor of Mary's late husband. The birth certificates indicate that I am the father of both children. Life is good. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.